In this video, I'm going to solve the first problem in the assignment 6. So in this problem, we have given an input string, yes, and we need to find the longest palindromic substring. So in this input, we have given a string, and the output for this is BAB. So this is the first and longest palindromic substring in this string. And output can also be ABA, because this is also the palindromic substring, and the length is equals to the BAB, so this can also be the output. And in order to solve this problem, I'm going to use the data structure object. So I'll iterate through the input, and I'll be storing in the object all the keys, each letter as key, like B, and in the property of that key I'll be storing the indexes of the occurrence of the letter. So first we have B, so I am storing its index as 0, and next we have A, index is 1, and then we have B, so I'll be storing its index. I'm storing all these indexes in the form of array. And next letter is A, so here we have 3, and D as 4. We need to find the longest palindromic substring, so I'm declaring a variable called palindrome. So in this variable, I'll store the palindromes, and I'll have a variable called length, in which I'm going to store the length of the palindrome, so that I will be able to compare it with the next palindrome. And now what I'm going to do is I'll loop through this object, and at each key, for each key I will iterate through the indexes array, and I'll find if we have the palindrome in that. So let's see, we have this input BABAD, and we have B in the object, first key in the object. So first I'm going to check. Initially in the length we have 1, and for the palindrome I'll store it as a string of 0, the first letter in the string. So while iterating through this object, I'll be checking if the size of this array is greater than the length. So I'm going to check only if the length of this keys is greater than 1, right? Because if we have only one length as 1, then that letter is occurred only once in the string, so we don't need to check for the palindrome again. So I'm not going to check for D. I will only check for B and A. And let's start with B, and in the B we have 0 and 2 as indexes, which means I'll start from index 0 to index 2. This is 0 and this is 2, and I need to check if this is the palindrome. So to check for the palindrome, I'll start from the first index, and let's say the first index is head and the last index is tail, and I'll compare these two, so the letters at these two indexes, and if they are equal, I'll be incrementing the head and decrementing the tail until we reach the middle of the string. And anywhere if we get the letters are not equal, then it is not palindrome. So whenever I get the true for the palindrome, then I'll compare the length of the palindrome with the length we have, and I'll update it if the current length is greater than the previous length, and I will also update the palindrome here. So let's start writing the code for this. I'm writing a function called longest palindrome. And input for this is a string. So I'm declaring an object and initializing it to an empty object. So first I need to push all these letters to the object like this. So for that I'm using the for loop. Let I equals to 0, I less than string dot length I plus plus. If object dot has own property string of I. So what I'm doing here is, if I first I'll check if I have that current letter already in the object. If I have that letter, then what I'm going to do is I will just push the current index to that letters property. So we are storing them as arrays, right? So I'm just going to push that current index into that array. Else, if we don't have that object, then I'll just create a new key. And I'm going to create that as an array, so that whenever we get the same letter again, then I can just push the index of that letter to this array. So for now we have created the object with all those letters from the string, and we have stored all the indexes of the occurrence of those letters. Now let's declare two variables. One is for length, and I'm initializing it as 1, and I'm declaring a variable called palindrome, in which I'm currently initializing it with the first letter of the string, which is a string of 0. Now I need to iterate through the object, and I will start checking for the palindromes. So let key in object. Here I am declaring a variable called a bool, and I am initializing it to false. I am using this just to stop this for loop whenever I get the palindrome which is true. Then I just need to stop this for loop. So I am setting this bool to false. Whenever it is true, then I'll just stop the for loop. Now I just need to check for the palindromes in the keys which have the length, the array length is greater than 1. So I am just ignoring the arrays whose length is just 1. So for that I am checking if object of key dot length is greater than 1. So if it is greater than 1, then I'll start a for loop. Let I equals to 0, I less than object of key dot length minus 1 I plus plus. Oh, it is actually length. Now I'm declaring a variable called last index. So in this I'm storing the last index in the current array. So it's object of key dot length minus 1. Now I'm checking if object of key of last index is greater than last index minus object of key of I plus 1 is greater than length. So here what I'm doing is, if we take this example, we have for B 0 and 2. So 2 is the last index. I am checking 2 minus 0 is greater than the length. So initially we have the length is as 1, and now its length is 2. 2 minus 0 is 2. It is greater than 1. So then only I will check for the palindrome, because we are just checking for the longest palindrome. So if we have the palindrome which is longer than it initially, then we don't need to check for the palindrome in that. So that is why I'm checking if last index minus current index is greater than the current palindrome's length. If it is so, then what I'm doing is I'm using a while loop, so that let's say we have an index numbers like 4, 5. So first initially I will check for these two indexes. I'll check for the palindrome. If it is not palindrome, then I'm going to check between 0 and 4. Then if it is not true, then I'll be going to 0 to 2. So for that reason, to decrement this last index, I'm using the while loop. Object of key of last index greater than object of key. So here I'll be decrementing the last index, right? So that is why I'm using this terminating condition in the while loop, where I'll check if the last index is greater than the current index. In the while loop, I'm using a variable called end, in which I'm storing the last index. So because we have the last index here, but I don't want to change this one, I need to store the last index in this one. But in this while loop, we'll be changing the last index, we'll be decrementing it so that to check for the palindromes. So I'm using another variable in which I'm storing the last index. So in this I'm storing the index from the string actually. Now I'll check is palindrome. So this is palindrome is a function which I'll be writing it later. So in this function, it takes two parameters which are indexes. So what this function is going to do is it will check between these indexes. Let's say this is 0 and end is 5. So it will check between these two indexes if it is a palindrome or not. If it is a palindrome, it will return true. If not, it returns false. So I'll be checking this if it is a palindrome. Then if it is true, I will be changing the bool to true. Once I change the bool to true, I need to check if n minus object of key of I plus 1 is greater than length. So why I'm checking this one is here we'll be decrementing the end index and we'll be checking for the palindromes. So let's say we have length that is equal to some 5 and while checking this palindromes, we got the palindrome at indexes 0 and 2 for which the length will be 3. So we only need the longest palindrome here, and so I'm comparing if it is the length is greater than this initial length 5. So if it is only greater than this length, I'm going to take I'm comparing these two, and I'm just storing the longest length in the variable length, and it's a string in the variable palindrome. So I'm checking if n minus the current index length is greater than length. If it is true, then I'm going to store its length in the variable length. Object of key as well as I need to update the variable palindrome. Here I'm using the slice so that I don't need to change the input string. I'll just use the slice and store the palindrome in this variable. So it takes two parameters. The first one is the starting index, and next one is the end index. So it takes it will give the output let's say we have this as input, and the two parameters are 0 and 3. So it will give us the string from index 0 to 2. So we'll get this one. Now we'll check if bool. If it is palindrome, we have changed the bool to true. So if it is true, we just break the while loop, and we'll be decrementing the last index. So for here we have finished this while loop, and now but the for loop is still there. Now the I is incremented, and we'll be checking for the next palindrome. But So in the for loop what we are doing is, let's say we have this one, and in the last index we have 5. So in the for loop I will be checking, like I will be incrementing the starting index. So first we'll have I is equals to 0, and next we'll be and we'll check if for palindrome between 0 and the last index. If it is not true, we'll increment this starting index to 2. So we'll be checking between 2 and 5. So now if we have the palindrome equals to true already, then we don't need to go to the next element and check for it. So here we'll be checking if bool, then break. If bool is true, then we'll just break, so that we'll break the for loop. And I'm closing this here. And now we need to write is palindrome function to check the if the given string is palindrome or not. So let's say function is palindrome, and it takes two parameters, let's say m and n. So in this function what we are going to do is we'll find the middle index, let's say half equals to math.floor n minus m plus 1 by 2. So let's say m is 0 and n is 3. Then here what we are doing is 3 minus 0 plus 1, which becomes 4 by 2 is 2. So if we have m and n as 0 and 3, that means we have these indexes. So the half should be 2, right? So for that reason we are finding the middle index. Now if half is less than 2, then we just return true, because we have this let's say it is 0 and 2, m and n is 0 and 2, and this is the string we have. So m and n are actually it should be equal, because we are sending these indexes from the object that we store, right? Like here if we see this, these two indexes are the m and n for the palindrome. So these are the indexes of this letter B, right? So these two indexes, at these two indexes we have the same letter. And if the half is less than 2, which means it should be just one letter or 2 letters or 3 letters. So any of these we have the palindrome is equals to true. So that's why I'm just checking if half is less than true, I'm just gonna return true. If it is not less than 2, then what I'm going to do is I'm using a while loop to check to compare the indexes. So here I'm taking two indexes, like one starting from starting index from n, m is the starting index and n is the last index. So I'll keep incrementing the m and decrementing the n and compare the both of these letters of these indexes, and if they are true, then it is a palindrome. So in this while loop I am checking if string of m is not equals to string of n. If it is not equal at any point, then we just return false. Return false. If it is equal, then I am going to increment the m and decrement the n. And we have this while loop here, so we need to change the half so that to have the termination condition. So I'll be decrementing the half. And once this condition is false and we did not get any false here, then we need to return true. So this is the function for palindrome. And now after doing all the iterations, finally we need to return the string in the variable palindrome. So I am returning palindrome. So this is the code for the to find the longest palindrome. Now let's check this one with the example. So let's take this example. Now let's go with the code. First we have one object, and in this while loop what we are going to do is we are just storing the indexes of each letter. So this will become for A it is 1 and 3, and D is 4. And now we have length equals to 1 and palindrome equals to string of 0, which is B. Now we start the iterating through this object, and variable bool equals to false. Now we check object key dot length is greater than 1. So we'll start with B, and its length is greater than 1. Then we start the for loop, and in the last index I'm storing object key dot length minus 1, which means here object of key dot length is 2, minus 1 is 1. So here last index equals to 1. And now if object key of last index, so object of key of last index is 1, so it is 2, minus object key of I is 0, so I is 0 plus 1, so 2 minus 1 equals to 1 is greater than length. We'll be checking this condition. So the length is 1 here, and this condition will be false. Okay, so there is a mistake here. So this is not plus 1, so this is just it will be 2 minus 0, which will be 2 here, and the length is 1, it is greater than the length, so it will enter into this while loop. In the while loop what we have is object key of last index is 2 is greater than the object key of current index which is I is 0. So if for object of key of 0 is here we have 0. Now in the end we are storing object of key of last index, So in the end we have 2, and we are checking for the palindrome, and for the parameters we are giving. So object key of I is 0 and end is 2. So for is palindrome we are giving inputs as 0 and 2. So let's go to the palindrome function. Here what we are doing is we need to find the half, the middle index. For this we are doing n minus m, which is a 2 minus 0 plus 1 by 2. So which is 3 by 2, which becomes 1.5. Let's say we have math.floor, so it becomes 1. If half is less than 2, so now the half is equals to 1, we just return true. So here it is true, then we change the bool to true, so the bool becomes true. If the bool becomes true, now we get to this if condition, where we'll check if end is 2 minus object key of I is 0 plus 1, which becomes 3, and we check if 3 is greater than the length is 1, 3 is greater than length. So what we are going to do is in the length we'll store 3, and in the palindrome, so this is our input string, right? So if from this we are doing the slice from index 0, so object key of I is 0, and end plus 1 is, end is 2 plus 1 is 3. So we need to slice the string from 0 to the index before 3. So we need to have 0, 1 and 2, all these 3. So in the palindrome we'll store BAB. Then so now the bool is true, so we just break the while loop, and we'll decrement the last index. So in the last index here we have 1, and now we will have 0. And if the bool is true, we are breaking this for loop also. So finally what we are doing is we are just returning this palindrome. So here we will be returning the palindrome, which is BAB, which is our final answer. Thank you.